Welcome back to the EJ Ward FuelView training series. In this video, we're going to be going over how to set up and manage alert settings. To start out, we need to drop down the Alerts and Alarms folder, and then we need to click on Alert Settings. So when the system is first built and you have a brand new system, it's not going to have anything built into it already. So what we need to do is click on Add Record. Once that record comes up, we can go ahead and give it a name. Now, we can't put anything into last error checked, and it hasn't run, so there's not going to be anything in there. And then the frequency is how often is it going to check. So you can put this at the lowest you can do is 5 minutes, and you can do it however many minutes you want. So if you want it for a full day, you can put it at 1440, and the default that we set is 15 minutes. We also have the active checkbox on the left-hand side, and we're going to go ahead and click on Save. Once that's been saved, it's going to tell you that it's saved successfully, and it says you have saved this alert without any users to be notified, and that's fine when you first save it. So we're going to go ahead and click on OK. Now you can see that there's a whole nother menu that's come down below it. So we have our notifications, and then we have the alert configuration settings. So I'm going to go ahead and maximize this box here. And we have two ways of adding emails that we can send out to users. The first way is by clicking on the Add User button, and then you can add a user that's already inside of the system as a user to log in, so it's not an employee. So we're going to go ahead and click on myself, and go ahead and click OK. Now, if you add another user, you'll see that it shows send email and send text message. If that user has a phone number that's set up inside of the system, it will allow them to send a text message to them as well. But if we set up one that doesn't have it, it's going to tell you text messaging not available without a phone number and a provider for the user. If you want to do that, you can go set that up through the user's profile itself, and then once you save it, you can come back here and add that. But we're not going to go ahead and do that now. So we're going to go ahead and go through all these alarms and what they mean, and you just check the boxes on the alarms that you want to see, and you keep the ones unchecked to the ones that you don't want. So you can make a lot of different alert settings. So you can make an alert setting for just terminals, or you can make one for everything if you want to. So we're going to go ahead and start going through these. The first one that we have is terminal alerts. We have an intrusion. So if somebody actually gets into the terminal, they open up the terminal itself, an auto restart. We have anytime somebody changes the switches that are on the pumps to turn it to bypass or off. We have if there's a power loss detected. The RTC is a real-time clock error. This is going to happen with the Ward 4 FCT. So if that happens, it's going to let you know. The easiest way to tell is that the time on the terminal is not going to be correct. We have if the AC power gets restored, so after a power outage or something like that. We have if the pump goes offline. And then we have transactions without terminals for a certain amount of hours. So you can put anything into these boxes here. So if let's say I have a terminal and I know that it's going to have transactions at least once a day, I can put 24 hours in here, and whenever it hits that 25th hour, it's going to go back, and if there's no transactions for the last 24 hours, it's going to give me an alert. I also have issues with an OS config file update. That's with our IoT terminals. And then we have below that tank alerts. So when we have tank alerts, it's if it's approaching the reorder level or if it's below the reorder level. You can do either or on those. We have our pump alerts. So if the pump goes into bypass, if it turns off, or if it goes offline, or if the transaction time difference for the pump is within a certain amount of minutes. Now we have a couple of these on here. There's one for employees and vehicles as well. What this means is that if you have a transaction and then within 2 minutes you have another transaction that comes in, typically you're not going to have two transactions on the same pump within 2 minutes, because you have to take an effect as somebody has to drive up, they have to put in their information, they have to take out the dispenser, put it into the filler neck of their vehicle, fill up, and then they have to put it all back and then drive off. And then the next person has to do that. So you aren't going to have a transaction within that amount of time. You can also put in the information if you want to as well. You know that each person on average takes about 5 minutes to fuel. You could put 5 minutes here if you wanted to, or whatever time that you would like. Below that, we have our communication alerts. So you have any time that it missed communication time for the terminals, if the terminal goes offline or the network goes offline. Below that, we have our TLS alerts. Now, the TLS service adds a little bit more to it, but this is just a basic one, and you don't have to have the TLS service to use this. It's if it missed a TLS communication time, if it hasn't communicated with a certain amount of time, so if you want to do a larger amount of time instead of just missing its first communication time. And then you have if the unit has reported any alarms, and it will show what alarms it's actually reported. Below that, we have our transaction alerts. So you have the time difference for the vehicles. You have if the volume is greater than the tank size, so that would be the tank of the vehicle. You have the transactions with volumes greater than a certain amount. So let's say that you know that nobody's going to fuel over 100 gallons. You could put 100 gallons there, and anytime it gets more than 100 gallons, it's going to give you an alert. You got employees that haven't fueled within a certain amount of days. You have transaction processing errors. So if there's been transaction processing errors within a certain amount of days, it's going to give you that information. You have the time difference for the employees. You have your highest volume transaction. So this is just going to give you a top, however many you put in here. So this is going to give me the top 50 highest volume transactions, and it would do it every time it checks for an alert. So this one would be an alert that you would put for like a day, each day or each week. Then you have your time transactions with volumes less than a certain amount. And then you have any unprocessed raw transactions within a certain amount of time that you want to put in however many days. Below that, we have our vehicle alerts. So it's going to be the odometer, the hour meter changes by the vehicle. Anytime it changes, it'll give it to you. So that's one thing you might want to put for like a day or something like that, or a week. You have the distance driven between a transaction is over a certain amount of distance. So we typically put this at 500 because that's what we default our maximum distance inside of the vehicles, but you can put whatever you would like in there. We also have the same thing for the time. So the time driven between transactions is a certain amount of hours. And then you have the vehicle hasn't fueled within a certain amount of days. The last section we have is the terminal OS alerts. And with the terminal OS alerts, we have unable to run an unzip test command for corruption. This is for IoT terminals, and most of these terminal OS alerts come from our IoT terminals. So we have unable to run the unzip command. We have no valid configuration file in the unzip directory. We have unable to update internal database. We have the unable to read configuration file, extra configuration files. We have a configuration zip file corrupted. We have unable to open the unzip directory, unable to parse the configuration files, unable to open the configuration files, or missing configuration files. And all of these have to deal with the IoT terminal specifically. So this is not for your Ward 3 FCTs or your Ward 4 FCTs. Once you select all of these that you want, so for instance, I want to know when my network terminal goes offline, and that's all I want for this one. I can come in here and select however many I want. You can select all of them if you want to, and then we're going to go down to the bottom and click on Save. And once you click on Save, it's going to save that, and it's going to start checking every 15 minutes, and any of your terminals go offline, it's going to send me an email for that, or whoever you have on this list. So we can go ahead and close out of this guy, and then come back to our main page, and now we have it here. This is one of the few things inside of the FuelView system that you can actually delete. So there is a delete button to take it away, and you would have to completely remake it. Now to change it, we just have to click on the name. So we can click on training alerts. It's going to come up for us, and then we can go ahead and add something. So let's say we want to add an intrusion. We can add that, go down to the bottom, click on save. And now it's saved, and the next time it checks, it's going to be checking for an intrusion and a network offline, and not just the network offline. So at the very end here, if we don't want to use this anymore, let's say it was an alert and you were trying out some things and you don't want it, you have another one that you like, all you have to do is click on this delete button. It's going to come up with a confirmation box telling you that, do you really want to delete this? You click on OK, and it's gone. So we would have to make a new one through the add records, just like we did before, to add it back into the system. And that concludes the video for how to set up and manage our alert settings. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.